So, recently, as part of Streetpass South Wales, links in the doobly-doo, I got to go to the London hands-on Nintendo Switch event. Now, what I want to focus on is, firstly, just give you a quick idea of what the system was like and things like that. Basically go from there. I also got to try out some games which we'll touch upon momentarily, such as 1-2 Switch, The Legend of Zelda Breath of the Wild, Mario Kart 8 Deluxe, and Splatoon 2. But first, let's talk about the system. Firstly, the screen quality on the tablet itself is very clear and crisp and clean. It feels, to be honest, cleaner than some tablets that you can get now, at least the tablets that I've used. The colours pop out nice and clearly. You can certainly tell what you are playing when you've got the Switch there. Now, as for the weight, it was very light. It was definitely lighter than the current Wii U gamepad. I would actually say it's perhaps on par with the weight of a 3DS, maybe a little bit heavier. What I'll add as a side note to that is the fact that during the time we were there, to make sure nobody stole them, there were security cases on the Switches, and these were quite heavy, so it did add some weight onto the Switch. But even with the sort of heavy security cases on there, it was very much a case of, it felt light, it felt comfortable in the hands. I mean, the feel of the buttons, they were perfect. They're very similar to the 3DS in that sense. The thumbsticks, they were comfortable, they were easy. I didn't really think about them, to be honest. They were that comfortable. So with the Nintendo Switch, I used it in a few different ways. I used it docked using a Pro Controller. I used it in tablet mode, so where you've got it undocked and you've got the Joy-Cons on either side. I did it a couple of times like that. I did have it in docked mode with the Joy-Cons separate, playing 1-2 Switch, which we'll come to in a moment. So yeah, I mean, I pretty much covered the different ways you can play it. The only one I personally didn't get a chance to do are in the Joy-Con grip, which is like the basic controller mode. From what I've heard from other people, that was still very comfortable. In fact, no matter which way I was playing it, it was comfortable. The motion controls worked fine. As for the HD rumble, I did get some of that with 1-2 Switch, but for the most part, a lot of the others were demos. The rumble was turned off. So to compare it to the Wii U and the 3DS, it still has a home console feel. In some ways it still feels like a Wii U. The games that are on there are much more sort of home console games than what you'd expect on a 3DS. What I would say is it is definitely bigger than a 3DS, as most people would imagine, but the buttons are just as comfortable. You could easily play both on the 3DS and a Switch all day. How much it went up to my expectations now. With that, what I would say is I was hyped for the Switch, and then I watched the presentation and I was kind of a little bit unsure what to do. I mean, I knew I wanted a Switch. I was optimistic, but also being realistic about the tech. I would say you need to experience the Switch to fully comprehend what it can do, is probably the best way I can put it, because your expectations are never going to quite match what the full experience of that console can do for you. But I just want to say that whenever I used the Joy-Cons separate to the console, so when playing 1-2 Switch or ARMS, they were very quick, very responsive. In fact, it doesn't require a sensor bar, makes it even more responsive almost, because it isn't waiting for that feedback on the console itself. It's a lot quicker. I think the only thing I would say is people with larger hands, they may have more of a situation, but I think certain people with longer fingers may find it a bit tedious. But then there's things like the Pro Controller, which feel very similar to an Xbox controller or something like that. ARMS and 1-2 Switch, you don't really need to worry about the controller size, because it's all about motion control in those instances. So I'm going to cover the event as well, just very quickly. The event itself was great. It was a little bit crowded with the display stands and everything else. It was difficult to move around, and with some cases there was problems with queuing as well. So much so that with some games, if you were extremely unlucky, you didn't get to play it at all. I know for some people that was starting to look very likely with Zelda Breath of the Wild. Speaking of which, let's switch to that. So, Breath of the Wild. One thing I will say is trying to get to play Breath of the Wild at the event was hectic, to say the least. The queue filled up very quickly, so you had to sort of hover around by the trailer so that when the queue opened you could jump in. Now when I got there, initially at the beginning of the event, demos were 20 minutes. Now when I went there, demos had then been shortened to 15. Later on in the event, just so that everybody could have a fair try, was the demos got cut down to 7.5 minutes. What I want to talk about is my 15 minutes with that beautiful game. Zelda Breath of the Wild, to try and sum it up, doesn't feel like any sort of Zelda game ever before. With the demo, it was the same demo that they had for the press back in E3 in 2016. So there was the only NPC you came across was the mysterious man right at the beginning, who I had some fun dialogue with, because they do give you some nice little dialogue options right at the beginning. But they do give you, in this demo, they do give you the freedom to move around however you like. I diverted a little bit off the plot point, and I found some bokoblins and had a little fight with them, at which point you can then pick up their weapon. Because they don't have a weapon to fight back, they'll start trying to throw stones at you, which I found quite funny. I did try my hand at trying to hunt down an animal so I could have some food, just in case I got low on health. When I got there, I was making too much noise, something that's in Breath of the Wild. So at the bottom of the screen in your HUD here, you have your map, a temperature gauge, and then the third one is a noise sensor. If you're making too much noise, enemies and wild creatures become aware of where you are. So you can choose to creep around and sneak around and create as little noise as possible. Now, if you do that, then stealth attacks do critical damage to the enemies. What also happens is you can sneak up on animals to actually hunt and gather them. Now, something that's been mentioned before is if you're stealthy enough, if you're clever enough, you can go through the game without having to actually fight any bokoblins or any of the normal NPCs, but you do get rewarded for at least slaying the bad guys. But on that note as well, for those who don't want to hunt animals in Breath of the Wild, you can forage for fruit and nuts and various other things like that. So, for example, right at the beginning of the game, you can pick some apples out of a tree. Those will restore some health. So yeah, you can choose exactly how you want to play it, how you want to replenish your health and things like that. Well, something I got as well was I got a hunter's axe, and I chopped down some trees and made some wood. Now, had I had longer, I probably could have crafted that into something at a later point, but I didn't have the option at that point in time. So that was something that was certainly be doing in the game. Now, something that I did see from other people who went straight onto the plot is very quickly the plot kicks off. You can get to the first major plot point within the first 20 minutes. But on the flip side of that, you can also change direction and actually not stick to the plot at all. You can actually just turn left instead of turning right at the beginning of the game and start climbing walls and trying to take down enemies, but you may get yourself into some trouble because you're not likely to have any weapons straight off. So I'd at least advise getting a weapon first, even if it's a stick. Sticks help. I know I've talked about the gameplay and how wonderful and clean and crisp and clear it was, but I feel like this is the start of something new. They want us to see that this is a big open adventure where you can do what you want, and I think that's what they're trying, the message that they're going to communicate with the Switch, that because you're not stuck to a TV screen, you can then take it with you and continue that adventure elsewhere. And I think that is what the Switch is all about, is flexibility, being able to choose to do what you want, go where you want as well. And that is the beauty of the Nintendo Switch. There was something that was at the event, well, I say at the event, was Super Mario Odyssey. Now, it was just this trailer with Mario and his new hat. Now, I mentioned with Breath of the Wild very quickly, and this is why I'm just quickly switching to this one as well, is that this feels like it's going to be a much more open world adventure than we've seen from Mario in a long time. I think it's going to be along the lines of the Nintendo 64 days with Super Mario 64 or Super Mario Sunshine, but even on a grander scale. And this is what I mean with the Switch. I feel like Nintendo wants us to know that this is a brand new opportunity. It is a brand new world and a brand new Nintendo. And I feel like we are going to be spending so much time exploring that the lack of games so early on, or apparent lack of games, because there are more due to be announced announced within the next month or so. I feel like that's because the games that they are bringing out, especially the ones coming directly from Nintendo, I think they know that they're going to be longer games than before, so they're going to keep you tied up for a few months. So let's move on to Splatoon 2. Now at the event it was a demo, a tutorial for those who haven't played Splatoon before, like myself. I'm a fan of Splatoon. I've watched plenty of stuff about Splatoon. I just don't have a Wii U, so I haven't played Splatoon 1. So there's a tutorial, get you used to it, and then you go into a match where it's 4-on-4 via local connection, local wireless, and you have an option of 4 different weapons. You have the good old-fashioned splatter shot, you have a roller, the supercharger, and then the new Splat Dualies. Because I was curious, I went for the Splat Dualies. The range on the Splat Dualies is a little bit less than normal. However, it does include the new dodge roll ability, which I noticed that when you dodge roll, because the Splat Dualies normally have dual target pins, when you dodge roll for a few seconds after, they become unified, so you can get a straight shot combining the two together for a more powerful hit against an opponent. The sub-weapon for the Splat Dualies as well was the suction bombs. All the specials have changed. You could probably look it up online. I think Game Explain have a video on the Splatoon demo as well, if you wanted to know more. But what I would say is, from what I know about Splatoon 1 and compared to Splatoon 2, it does feel like it's a fresher game. I played it in tablet mode. There was nice clear definition between the two colours. See how crisp the ink, you could see how fresh almost the ink actually looked on the ground, and it felt really smooth and quick to play with. It's definitely something that if you didn't play the first Splatoon, you should pick this one up. Let's switch to something else that I played. Something else that I got to play was Mario Kart 8 Deluxe. Now, I've played Mario Kart 8 at friends' houses on the Wii. Now, the only things that we got to play in the demo were the new characters. So that's King Boo, Bowser Jr. and the new Inkling characters that you can play in there as well. Now, I went Inkling. Once again, I was playing this in portable mode. So once again, I got to see how clear the characters, the contrast and everything like that was. And once again, it was a 8-person local wireless race. It was only one race, and because this was a demo version of Mario Kart 8 Deluxe, there was only 4 tracks to choose from, all of which we've seen in the previous Mario Kart 8, either via DLC or from the original. Now, what I will say is it definitely worked well. There was no frame rate drops or anything like that via the 8-person local wireless, and the game itself, although it's still Mario Kart 8 inherently speaking, it still felt new. It was easier to control, but yes, the game definitely feels better. It feels smoother, it feels faster. The one thing I do wish I got to try was the new battle mode. But this is a 1 race demo to be exact. But something else which is quite cool is you can now hold 2 items at once. You can't swap between the 2, but essentially what happens is, say you pick up a red shell and then you go through another item box and you pick up 3 mushrooms. Once you've used that red shell, the 3 mushrooms are automatically made available to you. There are actually on the track as well double item boxes similar to Mario Kart Double Dash, where it would fill both of your slots at the same time if you had 2 open slots. Let's move on to 2 new IPs from Nintendo, one of which I'd be interested to see more about, and I'll explain about what my experience with it in a moment. As for the other, it is very much a tech demo in my opinion, but I'm still going to give you a review of it, so let's switch to that. Let's talk about the one that most people are skeptical about. Let's talk about 1-2 Switch. Now, the first thing I want to say about this is I feel Nintendo should have included this as standard with the Switch. It should have been something like Wii Sports on the Wii or Nintendo Land with the Wii U. I feel like it's a very good party game. I'll talk now about the games I got to play. Is the one here I didn't actually play, but I know people that did and they enjoyed it. I'll also link to someone else's coverage of the 1-2 Switch from the New York event, funnily enough. But let's talk about what I played. So the first game that I played, I can only really call it Kendo Catch. It was a game where one of you is a kendo master with a sword and the other has to try and catch that sword. So the way that would work is you'd both have a Joy-Con each. One of you would then swipe, the other would clap to catch. Now, one thing I would say, when you swipe, the HD rumble kicks in and it feels like you're swinging something slightly heavier than a Joy-Con. Although not to the same effect, but it does rumble just enough that you can feel the force as if you were catching something. So 1-2 Switch definitely makes good use of the HD rumble on this one. Now, one thing I will say, with 2 of the games that I played, they were with complete strangers, and 1-2 Switch definitely requires eye contact, especially for something like Kendo Catch. Now, the next one I played, once again, don't know the exact title for these because they didn't really touch upon it, a milking minigame. So essentially, you were milking a cow, and the way that would work is you'd have the Joy-Con in one hand and you'd slowly bring it down. As you bring it down, you actually click down onto the SR and SL buttons, which are buttons reserved purely for when the Joy-Cons aren't connected to the tablet. They are hidden just on the inside recess, and what would happen is as you're bringing it down, you press SR and then SL and continue like that. Now, what I would say with that one is it definitely, once again, the HD rumble came into effect where it felt like you were pulling on something that was giving resistance back, so like a cow's udder, which is what the game was. Now, in this one, I lost quite significantly. But with the cow milking game, it was definitely fun, and it definitely would get a good laugh at a party, and that's the thing, the 1-2 Switch is very much a party game. But now, let's switch to the final game which I got to play. So let's switch. Right, I want to talk about this one in detail, but I'm running out of sunlight and I don't have studio lights, so let's try and make this quick. ARMS. It is a motion controlled game. You have one Joy-Con on each hand. Some people have described it like a HD reskin of boxing. And I wouldn't say that. 1, because you're not tethered by cables joining the 2 controllers together. 2, because there's a lot more technique and class added to ARMS. ARMS' art style is definitely better. I just realised I can turn the light on. So, ARMS, what I would say is firstly, the Joy-Cons were really responsive. They would click with whether you were moving both arms, one arm, how far you were twisting the remote. Because one of the things is you can punch straight forward. If you're a little bit off target, you can twist your wrist through the animation of that throwing punch, and it will curve your punch round. Now, each character, there was about 6 or 7 characters you could choose from on the day. Each one had 3 different fists they could use, and each fist had a different sort of ability. On that note, each character had a different style. So there's one which is based off of Mummy, very slow, but it hits very heavy. Then there's other characters like Ribbon Girl, who are very light and on their movements and things like that. Another thing I would mention as well, which isn't featured in the trailer, you can counter punches, so you can meet that punch mid-air, or you can just put your fist in the way to block that punch. But if you do that, your arms take damage. When your arm takes damage, if it takes too much damage, it'll become unusable for a short period of time as well. There are a couple of other things as well. You can tilt the Joy-Con forward to move forward. If you throw punches with both hands at the same time, it's essentially a grab and throw move. And there are specials in there as well, where once you build up the special bar, you press ZR and you unleash a flurry of punches, so you just punch continuously. By doing this, you essentially hit your target repeatedly, and most times you'll get a KO, to be honest. They manage to block. Now, blocking is very simple. You hold your controllers like this in a thumbs up pose when you're normally combating. If you need to block, you simply turn both Joy-Cons like that, so you create a miniature shield which holds up for a little while. Now, what I would say is I played this game with a good friend and it was good fun. I would like to see if there's a story mode to ARMS that we haven't seen yet, or there's more to the game, because right now it does feel like this was a demo where some of the characters are unlocked. There may be more in the full retail game. If there's a story mode, that would be something that would make this even more interesting as well. But I do also feel like there could be a competitive scene for ARMS later on, because it does have enough of a Street Fighter feel or something like similar to that, where you could get into a good competition with somebody and spend quite a bit of time playing this game. What I'm going to do now is wonder why Xenoblade Chronicles has come up. So I just want to give my final closing thoughts on both the Nintendo Switch and the games. Now, one thing I mentioned very briefly earlier was I did play some third-party games, but with some of those, because they were being played via a Pro controller, which, as I've said before, is very similar to the Xbox controller. It felt like any other game. With some of them, they didn't use the Switch's tech as well as they could, but that's not to say that other companies won't be using it in other ways. What I do want to cover is the games. The games are definitely fresh. They definitely feel like there's a breath of fresh air. In all seriousness, I feel like Nintendo have taken a hard look at themselves with what happened with the Wii U, realised that they need to change course and they need to get these games changed. They need to make changes to them. And as I mentioned with Breath of the Wild and just the trailer for Super Mario Odyssey, I feel like they're trying to get that message across, that everything is going to be new. There is a grander adventure available through Nintendo. And one thing I will also say as a closing note is the Switch is definitely worth a pre-order. If nothing else, pick up Breath of the Wild. I feel like there's going to be easily more than 100 hours of playtime in that if you want to go and explore the entire region. The map we have seen is massive. When I played the demo, I perhaps got 1% into the map. Funny enough, one thing about Breath of the Wild very quickly, which I'll mention. Recently, Eiji Aonuma was in an interview and he said that he went to a place where he was expecting to find something and it wasn't there. And this was one of the latest versions of the game at the time. So he went to one of the programmers and said, "These things should be here, why aren't they here?" And the programmer turned around and said, "Well, the wind has blown them away." Which just shows that with Breath of the Wild, it's going to be such an expansive game and so massive that you're going to want to play it. And I personally can't wait to see what Nintendo do with the Switch. Just want to thank you guys, and if you do want to ask me any questions or anything like that on the Switch, I'm happy to answer in the comments. I'll answer you as best as I can. This is my thoughts on the Nintendo Switch. I personally am going to pick one up day one with Breath of the Wild. I've been Tom, and I will see you in another life. Don't forget to be awesome.